One of the funniest men in American history lies beneath a decoy tombstone. Another spent a decade in a grave with no name on it at all. Tonight, we walk through the cemeteries Hollywood forgot. They made the whole world laugh. Tonight, almost no one remembers where they rest. From a fake boulder on a windswept island to an unmarked plot in the Nevada desert. These are the forgotten graves of the comedians America loved and left behind. We begin on Martha's Vineyard. John Belushi. John Belushi didn't just make people laugh, he redefined what television comedy could be. As one of the original cast members of Saturday Night Live, he brought a raw, chaotic energy that turned characters like the Samurai and the Blues Brothers into cultural landmarks. His film career exploded with Animal House, a movie that reshaped American comedy for a generation. But behind the manic energy was a battle with addiction that finally caught up with him on March 5, 1982, when he was found dead at the Chateau Marmont Hotel in Los Angeles, the victim of a fatal combination of cocaine and heroin. His funeral drew grieving friends from across the entertainment world, and he was laid to rest on Martha's Vineyard, a place he loved. Here's what most fans never learn. For years, his grave was marked only by a large boulder, and fans stole pieces of it as souvenirs until so little remained that cemetery officials quietly moved his actual remains and left a decoy stone to protect them. Today, tourists photograph the wrong rock, never knowing the real resting place lies hidden nearby. Chris Farley. Chris Farley arrived in comedy like a hurricane, and for a few unforgettable years, nobody on television was funnier. His physical comedy on Saturday Night Live, from the Chippendales audition to the motivational speaker living in a van down by the river, made him one of the most beloved performers of his generation. Tommy Boy proved he could carry a film all on his own. But Farley was chasing the shadow of his hero, John Belushi, and tragically followed a similar path. On December 18, 1997, he was found dead in his Chicago apartment at just 33 years old, the cause a lethal mix of cocaine and morphine. His funeral in Madison, Wisconsin brought out fellow cast members and childhood friends who remembered a gentler side of him few audiences ever saw. He was buried in his home state, in a quiet cemetery near Green Bay, far from the cameras and studio lights that made him famous. Few visitors realize his family chose a modest, unassuming headstone on purpose, wanting him remembered as a son and brother, not just a punchline. The laughter he gave the world never quite made its way back to his grave. Freddie Prinze. Freddie Prinze became a star almost overnight. At just 19 years old, his stand-up comedy caught the attention of network executives, and by 1974 he was headlining the hit sitcom Chico and the Man, becoming one of the first Latino actors to lead a major American television show. His rapid rise made him a symbol of a new generation of comedians. Yet the pressure of sudden fame, combined with personal struggles, proved overwhelming. On January 29, 1977, Prinze died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, a death his family has long maintained was accidental rather than intentional. He was only 22 years old. His funeral was attended by heartbroken castmates who had watched him transform from an unknown comic into a household name in barely 3 years. He was laid to rest at a peaceful memorial park in Los Angeles, not far from the studios where he once filmed. Few people know that his son, actor Freddie Prinze Jr., has spoken publicly about visiting the grave privately, away from any cameras. The comedian who broke barriers for Latino performers in Hollywood now rests in a plot that rarely sees a visitor. Redd Foxx. Redd Foxx spent decades perfecting a comedic voice that was sharp, unapologetic, and unlike anyone else on television. After years on the raunchy stand-up circuit, he became a household name as Fred Sanford on Sanford & Son, one of the most successful sitcoms of the 1970s. His gruff charm and impeccable comic timing made him a legend. On October 11, 1991, Fox suffered a fatal heart attack on the set of his new series The Royal Family, collapsing in front of cast and crew who initially believed it was one of his jokes. His death shocked the industry, and his funeral drew comedians and actors who considered him a trailblazer. What happened next is one of the saddest stories in comedy history. Due to financial troubles late in his life, his grave in Las Vegas went completely unmarked for nearly a decade. It wasn't until fans and fellow performers raised money that a proper headstone was finally placed. For years, The man who made millions laugh had nothing but grass and dirt marking where he lay. Rodney Dangerfield. Rodney Dangerfield spent nearly his entire life chasing respect, and in doing so, became one of the most quotable comedians America ever produced. His self-deprecating catchphrase turned him into a stand-up icon, and his role in Caddyshack introduced him to an entirely new generation of fans. Even in his 70s, he remained a fixture in film comedies, refusing to slow down. On October 5, 2004, Dangerfield died from complications following heart valve surgery, just weeks after undergoing a risky procedure he had joked about publicly beforehand. His funeral brought together decades of comedy royalty who credited him with mentoring some of the biggest names in the business. He was laid to rest at Westwood Village Memorial Park in Los Angeles, resting near other legends of film and television. His headstone carries one final joke, written by the man himself, ensuring that even in death, he could not resist one more punchline. It remains one of the most photographed headstones in the cemetery, yet the man behind it is rarely spoken of today. Milton Berle. Milton Berle earned a title few entertainers ever receive, the man who practically invented American television comedy. As the host of the Texaco Star Theater in the late 1940s, he became known as Mr. Television, drawing such enormous audiences that entire cities reportedly saw a drop in movie ticket sales on the nights his show aired. His rapid-fire jokes and outrageous costumes defined an entire era of broadcasting. Berle worked well into his 80s, refusing to disappear quietly from the industry he helped build. He died on March 27, 2002, from complications related to colon cancer, at the age of 93. His funeral gathered decades of Hollywood history, from young comedians who idolized him to old friends who remembered the earliest days of live television. He was buried at Hillside Memorial Park in Los Angeles, resting among other giants of the entertainment industry. Few remember that Berle kept meticulous joke files his entire life, reportedly organized into hundreds of categories. The man once watched by nearly every household in America now rests in a grave that draws barely a glance. Buddy Hackett. Buddy Hackett built a career on a booming voice and impeccable comic instincts, becoming one of the most beloved character actors and stand-up comedians of the mid-20th century. His unforgettable performance in Disney's The Love Bug introduced him to families across the country, while his stand-up specials cemented his reputation as one of the sharpest comedic minds in Las Vegas. For decades, he was a fixture on late-night television, trading jokes with hosts like Johnny Carson. On June 30, 2003, Hackett died of natural causes at his home in Malibu, California, at the age of 78. His funeral was a quiet, private affair, reflecting the low-key life he preferred away from the stage. He was laid to rest in Los Angeles, in a cemetery shared by many of his old comedic peers. Few fans realized that Hackett largely retreated from public life in his final years, choosing family time over fame. The comedian who once filled Las Vegas showrooms night after night now rests in near-total obscurity. Totie Fields. Totie Fields was one of the boldest female comedians of her era, breaking into an industry that gave very few women a stage of their own. Her fearless, self-deprecating humor about her weight and personal life made her a sensation in nightclubs and on television variety shows throughout the 1960s and 1970s. She became a frequent and beloved guest on programs hosted by Ed Sullivan and Merv Griffin. Tragedy struck when complications from diabetes led to the amputation of one of her legs, yet incredibly, she returned to the stage just months later, refusing to let it end her career. On August 2, 1978, Fields suffered a fatal heart attack at just 48 years old. Her funeral drew an outpouring of grief from an industry that recognized how far ahead of her time she truly was. She was buried in Los Angeles, her grave a quiet, understated marker for a woman who once commanded some of the country's biggest stages. Her name, once spoken alongside the biggest stars in comedy, has slowly faded from memory. Andy Kaufman. Andy Kaufman was never really a comedian in the traditional sense. He was a performance artist who used comedy as his medium. His deadpan foreign man character evolved into Locke Gravis on the hit sitcom Taxi, but it was his unpredictable live performances, blurring the line between reality and character, that made him legendary. Audiences never quite knew if they were watching Andy Kaufman or one of his elaborate creations. In 1984, Kaufman was diagnosed with a rare and aggressive form of lung cancer, and he died on May 16th of that year, at just 35 years old. Because so much of his career revolved around elaborate hoaxes, many fans initially refused to believe the news, and conspiracy theories about a fake death persist to this day, though there is no confirmed evidence to support them. He was buried in a cemetery on Long Island, New York, in a modest plot that gives no hint of the chaos and creativity he brought to entertainment. Decades later, some visitors still leave notes at his grave, half joking that he might read them.